Okay, when you're ready, you can begin.
Okay. Hello. This little demonstration is focusing on the antebrachial fascia, and I want to show you several things that we discovered when we started to do some 25 years ago in Maastricht, the University of Maastricht. We started to do tissue sparing, connective tissue sparing dissections. So instead of preparing or dissecting anatomical units like ligaments and muscles, we started to try to remove everything that is not connective tissue. And the first thing you then need is what to do with the fascia antebrachi, or the antebrachial fascia. This is the dorsal aspect of the antebrachial fascia. Here's the epicondyle, here that's the black needle, here's the wrist, and in between there's the dorsal aspect of the fascia, covering the muscles, as they say. So the students were used to take the fascia away in order to clean the muscles and to approach the muscles to dissect them. But I will show you that the situation with the antebrachial fascia and the underlying muscles is quite different here. Here, for example, you can easily prepare away that layer of collagenous connective tissue that you could call a fascia, and then you see that in between or under it is that loose areolar connective tissue that we know so well from the demonstrations of Dr. Kimberto. And you see it's very easy that the muscles are situating here and they can move under the fascia. So that's a typical example of the fascia as a gliding sheath, enabling the muscles to move. But here, if you go more up, you see that my students became a problem. They had a problem because they could not remove the fascia. Because when you cut open the fascia here, you see that all the muscle fibers under it are inserting to that fascia. So this is quite different. This is not like here a protective sheath enabling the muscles to move, but this is an aponeurotic layer. This is, to insert too. And it comes out that, for example, here again, where we have to do with the anconeus muscle, there you see again simply that the fascia is just a layer over it, and again there's no direct mechanical connection between muscle fibers and the fascia. So it depends on what is the functional issue for the fascia. And to show you what I mean is, I do this. Here I opened the fascia and detached from it the muscle fibers of the muscle under it. You have to, and so you see here the fascia with muscle tissue still inserting to it, and then it comes out that this is a kind of compartment or case in which this muscle, this is the musculus extensor digitorum, which is officially also composed of 4 different muscles, but that this muscle is situated in a kind of compartment, and that the walls of the compartment, you can see that loud and clear, so to say, is used by these muscle fibers to insert to. So these muscles, and it is valid for all the 3 muscles in this domain, are pennate muscles. Now look how they demonstrate that up to now in an anatomical atlas. You see, that's quite different. There you have parallel fibered muscles, and they all go to the epicondyle with a kind of tendon. And that is not the case. If you go back to the specimen, we see that these muscles are very powerful muscles, and they are pennate, and they insert to the connective tissue layers like the fascia, and here there are intermuscular layers. I could take the muscle now, and then you see that also between this muscle and neighboring muscles there are strong connective tissue layers to which muscle fascicles are inserting, and it all converges here to the epicondyle. There is not any muscle fiber inserting to the epicondyle. No, the epicondyle, so to say, is the focus or the center of all kinds of fascial structures, let's say superficial fascia, intermuscular septa, deep septa, and they all converge to the epicondyle. So it's a kind of other situation than usually is depicted, because what we have here actually works as a collateral ligament. The collateral ligament which is often demonstrated as a separate connective tissue entity, is not a isolated connective tissue entity. It is the extension, so to say, of these muscles of the forearm, these extensor muscles. And the same thing you see happen if you look deeper. Because the muscle that you see here is the supinator muscle. And the supinator muscle also has a fascia or epimysium. Here is the supinator muscle, and you see that the fibers are in that direction. Here in the deep, there's the deep branch of the supinator nerve, and here you see the muscle fibers of the supinator muscle converging to another layer of connective tissue. And this connective tissue layer is also joining the more superficial connective tissue layers and then inserting with the others to the epicondyle. So here, at the level of the yellow needle, there must be the annular ligament. And you see that I have really cut here a kind of connective tissue structure, but it was only the separation of two layers. There are no circular or annular fibers. This is, the proximal extension of the whole connective tissue apparatus, what we call the lateral, or the lateral connective tissue tensile forces transmitting connective tissue and in that there is the so-called annular ligament engaged, so to say. There is no separate annular ligament, and there are no fibers running in the circular way. If you go back to the modern atlas, you see here that they describe the annular ligament as an annular, situation around the radius, and here you have the collateral ligaments. But what we in fact have is that this is the proximal continuation of the layers of connective tissue that I showed, and that this is the proximal continuation of the supinator fascia or aponeurosis or whatever, and that you have to cut here in order to make an annular ligament. And that's exactly what they do in the atlases. Look, here. There's the supinator muscle, and here you make a cut. There's the head of the radius, because here is the annular ligament. So the annular ligament, anatomically, is to be considered as an artifact. It was made when you remove muscles, there is connective tissue left, and the connective tissue then might look like an annular ligament around the red of the radius, and then the artist, the anatomical artist or the is, drawing that as annular fibers, and there are no annular fibers, maybe in the capsule, but mechanically spoken, it's much better to tell or to consider that there are muscles with proximal connective tissue extensions in the form of layers, and that whole apparatus is converging to the epicondyle. And then you get a very dynamic, stabilizing situation. Then you get the kind of situation that I indicate when I talk about ligaments. Ligaments are not anatomical units, but architectural units, of connective and muscle tissue in series with each other, and they can prevent a joint to become destabilized or become whatever, and they keep the joint together. So that's what I would like to show you. And I could go on, I could do the same thing with other muscles here. I could show it you on the other side, but on the other side you will see that the difference is that here you have the strong layers on the outside, and deeper the connective tissue layers become weaker. On the flexor side, it's the opposite. On the flexor side, everything is oriented to the medial epicondyle, but there you have the deep, strong connective tissue layers in the deep and the superficial, and that is already seen, that you see that here the antebrachial fascia is much thinner, and he will meet deeper layers of connective tissue. And here you can see another feature which I like to show you. You can see here that there's also the transverse fibers that are the beginning of what will appear here as the retinaculum. So the retinaculum is not a very sharp discrimination. It is just gradually you get here more circular or annular fibers, and you could talk about the retinaculum. Okay, that was it. Good. Thank you.